right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the stream. It's a Tuesday. But I'm gonna record a Private Citizen. There's just no other way I can do it tonight. That didn't make any sense, did it? There's no other way I can do it this week. I can only do tonight. So tonight it'll be. And of course, I'm going to talk about the German Traffic Light Coalition. I promised this episode, so I'm going to deliver it. Episode 99. It's pretty wild. Next week, there's going to be the 100th episode, which is very special. Okay, Hindenburg wants an update. I want to record a podcast. So, Hindenburg ABC has been renamed Narrator. After updating, please open Narrator instead of Hindenburg ABC. I don't even know what that is. I have no idea. No idea what you guys are trying to do there, but more power to you. Right. I think I'm just going to take it away and get the show on the road and get the podcast out, right? As usual, normal podcast recording ground rules apply. You'll probably know those by now, so I'm not going to go into it much further. My nose is itching. Why's my nose itching now? It wasn't itching all day. As soon as I start recording a podcast, my nose is itching. Like, what the fuck? Also, my knuckles are skinned, but I know where that is. From boxing. So, I know where that is. Shall we start? I'm just going to start. Let's see if I can get this on the road. Here we go. I should probably do a little bit of a test recording. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Ублюдок, мать твою! А ну иди сюда, говно собачье! Решил ко мне лезть? Ты засранец вонючий,
Yeah, that's it.
Goddamn Ruskies!
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Ублюдок, мать твою! А ну иди сюда, говно собачье! Решил ко мне лезть? Ты засранец вонючий!
That sounds good. Right. Let's do this properly now. Let's get the show on the road. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. Podcast for critical thinkers. This is episode 99 for Tuesday, the 7th of December, 2021. The traffic light is on. Hey everybody, my name is Fab, I'm your host, and it is indeed on. Traffic Light Coalition is on. The coalition agreement has been signed. It was signed this morning. I'm recording this on Tuesday. And we're going to talk about it today. How are you doing? Welcome to the show. Thanks for listening. On a Tuesday today, because there's just no other way I can do a podcast this week, so I'll have to do a day early. But the release schedule is going to be all over the place till the end of the year anyway, because I'm going to have to do some double episodes so that I have like Christmas and New Year's off. But I've explained all of that. Basically, the next episode will be a bit of a special episode where there's a link in the show notes if you go to privatecitizen.press to a forum post where I explain what I'm going to do. Just basically... if you have some questions that you always wanted to ask me and that weren't in the previous AMA episode, and they apply to the topic that I'm planning, which is basically my background and where I'm coming from, then, please ask them there, and I will address them in the next episode. That's going to be a special episode, and then I don't know what 101 will be just yet. I have some ideas, but it's not final. And then the 102 will probably be the last episode of this year, and that'll be, as is customary, as we did last year. I'll do a roundup of all the shows in the year, and comment a little bit and give a little bit of a bottom line, some thoughts about where the year how the year has developed, and also how the show has developed within that, and then maybe a bit of an outlook, what I'm planning for next year. So that's the plan. Before we get into the topic at hand, I will have to apologize for episode 98, which didn't really release. I kind of pressed the button, but I kind of fucked up. So the show notes were out, so the show was released, but the audio file wasn't. So that would mean that for some podcatchers that check this, you wouldn't have gotten a release notice. It wouldn't have just shown up. Other people, it showed up, but they couldn't play the audio because it wasn't there. It's complicated. I forgot to run a command on the server, which basically moves the file to the place where the public has access to it. So, of course, that didn't work. That is completely my fault. Nobody else fucked up but me, so I apologize for that. It's the first time for this podcast. I've certainly done something like this before with other podcasts. Yeah, it's just the way it goes. Also, a public service announcement: if you hear a loud ticking during the recording of this podcast, like this, please don't be alarmed. I'm wearing a very brutalist quartz wristwatch, which is an old one, because my beloved Seamaster is in revision, and the ticking's been. I've been wearing this for 2 days now. It was my watch I used before I got the Seamaster, and it's I had them to put. I had the watch guys put a battery in it. So because I can't live without a wristwatch, I don't feel quite human without my Seamaster. But this is will have to do. But the ticking's driving me insane. So I don't know if I'm not my usual self, I'll blame this fucking quartz watch. I don't know. It's just not techno. I mean, it's better than a fucking Apple Watch or some horrible thing like that. But it's still, it's too brutalist for my taste. On the other hand, it does have a red star on it, which I kind of like in today's political climate, because it's a swatch. It's the From Russia with Love special. They made special editions for all the Bond movies back in the 90s, and this was my favorite one, so I got that one. Obviously, 007 fan. That's why I have the GoldenEye Seamaster as well. But yeah, anyway, that's apropos of nothing. Let's get into the show. I think that's all the preliminary stuff out of the way. So let's move on and talk about the Traffic Light Coalition Agreement. What a word, the Traffic Light Coalition Agreement. But that's what it is. Silly name, but kind of interesting. And I had, of course, promised to do this because episode 88, this was when I came back from Spain. I did an episode on the federal election, and Astral. I'm obviously live streaming this on Twitch as always. Astral says, "Red Star, you commie." Well, yeah, this is the Russia with Love watch. So yes, it is styled after a classical It's like a blue watch face with the red star, where the 12 would be. It's styled very much like a classical Red Army watch, pretty much. And it says London, Istanbul, Belgrade, Zagreb, Trieste, and Venice on it, because those are the locations in the movie. And I've been to all of those, incidentally, which is kind of cool. But anyway, in episode 88, this was at the beginning of October, I promised that I would talk about, I talked about the different coalitions. It's probably worth going back if you haven't listened to that. You're not cued into the intricacies of the German parliamentary system. I talked about the different coalitions that were possible, which was the Jamaica coalition, basically, and the traffic light coalition, and we got the traffic light coalition. I also talked about how, people said, this is going to be so bad. It's going to take so long to form the government. Here we are, beginning of December, and we have a government. I don't even think this was very long. Also very orderly coalition talks, not like the last Grand Coalition, where basically it was like a bitch fight. This was very orderly and very calm and very well done, I feel. No leaks to the press, nothing like that. And it seems to be very good for Germany in general. Some interesting things. There's a lot of stuff in here. I picked out all the interesting things I find interesting. Some of them are apropos of not pretty much this show, but there's a lot in here that concerns privacy and civil rights. So those will be interesting. And also a little bit of climate stuff, which will probably be important in upcoming shows. I have a feeling if my plans pan out, not to mystify it, but I'm planning on having Mike back on the show for a few episodes, and it's kind of one of his hot topics, and it's definitely very interesting, and it concerns everything. But we'll see that with this. I think this is very important, of course, for Germany, where I live, but also for Europe. Germany, with Brexit, Germany, I think I'm not. I'm German. I don't really want to be too full of myself as a German, but I think this is pretty much accepted. With Brexit and under Angela Merkel, Germany has kind of put itself in the position of basically leading the European Union. Germany always, strongest economy in the European Union. By quite a margin, and also kind of the most populous country. And generally, it was kind of like the European Union was, we talked about the EU quite a lot here, but, traditionally it was a bit of a trifecta, right? It was France, Germany, and the UK, and they would balance each other out. Now the UK is out, and now it's basically just France and Germany. France and Germany decide everything pretty much, as far as I can tell these days. And, even before Brexit, right? So the GDPR is pretty much the German privacy laws that we had before, just, Europeanized and with stronger penalties. And, a lot of these things happen like that. And, France definitely decides stuff as well, but Germany plays a very big role in the EU, and a lot of these laws I think will have effects, or these are goals, right? They're not laws, but these are goals that the coalition wants to put into law. And if it happens, we don't know yet, of course, if all of this will happen. But these are their goals, and if a lot of these come through, it will impact all of Europe. And with that, pretty much, it has a ripple on effect. Which stuff that impact Germany generally impacts the EU, and then it impacts the US often, like with the GDPR, stuff like that. Not everything, but some of this stuff I think will, in negative and positive ways, and also, Russia and to some degree China, I think. This is all interconnected, and that's why I, also talk about US politics. Even though I'm in Germany, because they affect us, and it's all interconnected. So maybe, what I'm trying to say here, even if you're not in Germany, maybe you find this episode interesting. So what we have is a traffic light coalition, which means the Social Democrats, the Red Party, the Greens, obviously the Green Party, and the Liberals, which is the Yellow Party. and they have formed a government under Olaf Scholz, who used to be vice chancellor, and he used to be my my mayor when I was living in Hamburg before he went into federal politics. Then Peter Tschentscher took over, but Olaf Scholz, when I was living there, was my lawyer. And a funny story, I was actually, when he was already in Berlin, he was already vice chancellor. Me and my wife were staying at a camping place that is inside Hamburg. It's like on the river Elbe, and it's right below an area of Hamburg where all the villas are and the expensive houses and a lot of the rich people live. And we were staying there, and in the morning, this was Sunday morning, we were just staying there over the weekend, just because, it's kind of like a holiday getaway. If you don't really get away, you have a camping bus, you just go to the nearest camping place, and you stay there, and you in the evening, you can watch the ships go down the river Elbe, which was really cool. Anyway, so in the morning, we get up to go to the, camping places, camping sites always have this central hub of buildings, right, where the toilets are. And in this case, there's also you can buy bread rolls there and a little bit of food. Anyway, we go there in the morning to brush our teeth and maybe go to the toilet, and we were just on the very edge of the campsite, so we had to walk this road that is also a public road, and a walkway that goes along the campsite. And I see this guy running, jogging towards us. And there's lots of people jogging there in the morning, so I wasn't that much it didn't raise any immediate flags. But then I saw two guys jogging behind him that didn't look like joggers. They were pretty much square, and they looked like they were from a Sopranos movie. In tracksuits, but they looked like they were square. So these three people come running towards us, and I'm walking down. I'm like, I know that guy. And I'm looking at the guy, and he obviously was very used to this reaction and just happily smiled back. And just as he was right in front of me, I'm like, oh, my brain goes oh, that's Olaf Scholz. And I say, hello. And, he nods at me and runs past. And so I said to my wife, that was Olaf Scholz. That was our previous mayor, now vice chancellor. And what struck me about this is that those two guys, obviously his bodyguards, because it's federal politics, he has bodyguards. They looked like they weren't into running much. They looked very much like they skipped a lot of leg day. And they looked also, because they were so square, they looked like they were wearing heavy-duty plate carriers under their tracksuits. So for them, it was quite more of an exercise. And I think they were very pissed off that Olaf Scholz wanted to go running. So he obviously still, I don't know if he still does, he probably still does. He lives in Hamburg. Probably has a house in Berlin as well. But over the weekend, he's probably with his family at home. And he goes running along the Elbe. These bodyguards, to this day, I have it in my brain, this image of these two guys, him being very happy and smiley and politician-y, and those two guys are fuck, Sunday morning, why does this guy always go running Sunday morning? Anyway, he's our chancellor now. I have a link, obviously private citizen.press as usual, all the links, everything I talk about is in there. German links today, a lot, of course, German topic. There's a link to the ministers in his government if you want to know more about it, if you speak German. It's probably, I didn't check this. Is there an English, there's an English Wikipedia page. I'm an idiot. Well, okay. I'm going to do some live show notes editing, right? I'm going to take that, the Scholz cabinet. Yeah, of course, we call it a cabinet. We put the English link in there. And then we take the little German flag off that I put on there. Because I'm an idiot. And now that's fixed. Now you've got an English link. In case you want to know more about the people in the government. But what I just want to quickly, well, one thing I just want to mention, I said this earlier a little bit, but it's kind of like, I kind of have to pat myself on the back here because I was completely right? There was no it's not really patting yourself on the back because basically that was common sense. It was just like all the rest of the press, all of my colleagues that are actually writing about this because they write about politics, were completely wrong. Because, I don't know, not because they're idiots. I think they're just blinded by, I think they wanted it to be bad to write about it. I don't know. But, they were like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. Like, especially also the foreign press who doesn't understand Germany. It's like, oh, this is going to be a time of instability. It's going to be as bad as Brexit for Germany. No government. Blah, 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 blah. Of course, nothing like that happened. In the contrary, we actually this time, and I talked about this when they changed, because of the pandemic, they changed the Infektionsschutzgesetz, so the pandemic rules, they hadn't even signed the coalition contract, which usually never happens. So it wasn't actually government. Merkel was still chancellor and still had a cabinet and was still running the government. But the upcoming coalition got together before they'd signed this agreement and had hammered out all the details. They already got together and changed the Infektionsschutzgesetz. So there was no instability at all. It was a very orderly process. Forming this coalition is very orderly. The government handover from Merkel is going very orderly. I mean, part of it might be the pandemic. I'm going to talk about that in the end. Because of that, not that much is changing at the moment. But, obviously everybody else was, of course, completely wrong about this, which was really a no-brainer. I don't know. I think sometimes the press, my colleagues, I mean, I'm the press too, technically. I often don't feel like it these days because, I don't know. Feel like they're all idiots because in cases like this they just like they read each other's stuff and then they get like in this groupthink mentality where everybody's like, oh yeah, it's going to be like this, and then either nobody else says anything or they don't let them say anything. They just shout them, no, it's going to be sorry. Yeah, so they were completely wrong about that. Now I want to talk about this is a very long coalition contract. And it always only has very short sentences where they kind of declare, I think it's 170 pages. And it's always only one or two sentences for everything, or two or three for every, like, basically new law they want to do. So it's a lot of things. And this, I got to get into this as well. Sorry, before I get into the actual points. I think this is also something that I said, that this is very good for Germany. And everybody's surprised about this, including the press, including the people who write about politics all day. Because they're all used to a grand coalition, which we had, we didn't have a grand coalition for those 16 years of Merkel, but for, there was a CDU, CSU, FDP, so conservative liberal government in there as well. But a lot of time grand coalition. And I think people in their brain connected to like Kohl, which wasn't a grand coalition, but he was also in the conservatives ran the government for Kohl was chancellor for 16 years, and Merkel was kind of his like mini me basically. She was like groomed by him back in the day, and she was kind of the same thing, also 16 years. And people have forgotten what a dynamic government is like in Germany, which is very bad, because I haven't forgotten that. I still remember very vividly the red-green government, which I really liked. In hindsight, they made some very stupid laws about labor and unemployment, and also they basically gutted our research system. Something that my wife has felt personally, where it's very hard to actually get an actual job, getting paid for science, and she loves science. That's like her calling. But it's very bad, and like a lot that law, specifically the Wissenschaftszeitgesetz, was a red-green government invention. That was very bad. But generally, I really liked that government, and they had some really good impulses back then. For example, they brought Germany to the forefront of renewable energies, which a lot of people forget. We used to lead, at least Europe, but part of the world, with solar power and wind power. And when Merkel got into the government, she gutted all that. And she went full into nuclear until Fukushima happened, and then she axed nuclear. Energy politics, Merkel's energy politics, if you look back at it, is like a fucking disaster. But they used to have like lots of wind farms, which is going to be interesting because I'm going to talk about this in a bit as well. But in the 90s, end of the 90s, they put up a lot of wind farms in Germany because the government was subsidizing them very heavily. And then under Merkel, these subsidies actually ran out, which made them unprofitable because back in the day they weren't that profitable. They're more profitable now, but the technology wasn't as involved. The need wasn't really there so much. But like basically, the Red Green government was setting up Germany to excel at this, and it worked really well. But then under Merkel just let the subsidies lapse, and they actually took functioning wind farms that were like 5-6 years old, that were working perfectly and generating energy and everything, down because they weren't like running them, wasn't profitable for we're talking like you're a farmer, right? And you have tons of farmland, and the government's like, hey, don't you want to put 5 wind farms on there, and we're going to pay you for everything. And when the subsidies lapsed, it was like it wasn't profitable to have. I mean, you have to maintain these things. You have to fucking, there's stuff involved. Getting power to the, I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't really profitable for people, and it took them down. Also, the subsidies for the solar panels. So I used to know somebody back in the day when I was studying who worked in Bonn at a company that was like leading in R&D in the world pretty much in solar panel development. And that company, okay, there was also some corruption and shit going on, but basically when the subsidies for that also lapsed, they started toppling that whole sector, and eventually also killed the company. And so now a lot of the wind farms that are actually in Germany right now, or they're being built, it's like Dutch technology, because we fucking didn't develop that technology anymore because, we just let it go for 10 years because it wasn't profitable, because the government wasn't interested in it. And then Fukushima happened, and suddenly they were interested again. Anyway, that's going to become important later on. But what I want to say is, like, this is really good for Germany. There's a lot of stuff in this coalition agreement that I don't agree with, that I think is dumb. Some of it I'm going to talk about. But never mind. The good thing is there's moving. And I've talked about this earlier. There's like dynamics in politics again. And, I don't like the Greens very much and their policies, but like, there's the FDP, the Liberals are in here, and they're balancing the Greens, and everybody's kind of balancing each other. And it's more democratic, and it's a much healthier parliamentary. Debates are healthier and stuff like that, except on the pandemic, because nobody's fucking debating anything on there. But hey, we can't change that. So what are the interesting topics that I think the most interesting in here? The first one I think is the most interesting, but it's not going to concern this podcast, generally the topics we talked about, but I think it's very interesting anyway. We're going to talk about it. This government wants to legalize cannabis, which is going to be extremely... Like, I can say that, and if you're in the US, you're like, oh, right. Now, I mean, we did this ages ago. But for Europe, this is very, very progressive. Like, first of all, it's more progressive than the so-called progressive Scandinavian countries everybody goes on about all the time. But also, this is much more progressive than the Dutch and, like, Portugal, because what Portugal has done is decriminalize lots of drugs, including cannabis. And what the Netherlands is, they haven't even decriminalized it, right? In the Netherlands, it's actually still illegal. It is just that for decades, the politicians have basically told law enforcement to not charge anybody. So it's de facto legal. But what the German government wants to do the same thing the US has done, except on a federal basis, because we can do that, is completely legalize it. It has some weird side effects, so that you can, for example, I mean, this is all just, they haven't made a law, but if you look into what they're saying they want to do, it's probably still going to be illegal to grow it yourself. What they want to do is they want to have shops where you can buy it, where, cannabis and THC containing products are controlled, right? Where they're very quality controlled and where you can buy them. And then, of course, they're going to do this, of course, because the state's going to make billions on this in taxes. But also what they want to do with that is control that, that there's an age that you can't, underage people can't buy it. They haven't said what age they're aiming for, 18 or 21. There are some medical arguments for, saying 21's better. I'm no expert on this. But yeah, the interesting thing, of course, there is that growing it at home would still be illegal because it's only legal to buy in those shops. On the other hand, it would probably only be de facto illegal because, in Germany, even with recent changes in law that I also talked about, the threshold for getting a warrant to search your home are pretty high. And so basically, under this, let's assume it would be illegal to grow it, right? If your neighbors say this guy's growing cannabis and has like 3 plants, it's probably not going to be the threshold. The threshold would probably be industrial home growing and then selling it, under the counter instead of like in a legal shop. But like otherwise they can't get into your house, so they can't check. And since having it isn't illegal, right? If they can't prove that you're growing it yourself, they can't really do anything about it. Interesting fun fact may be that currently the situation we've had for decades in Germany is really weird, because we have a specialized drug law, and this is not even like in the criminal law. The criminal law basically says illegal drugs are illegal, and these are the punishments. And then it says what drugs are illegal is mentioned in the drug law, and then there's the drug law, and so under that, currently in Germany, it is only possession. Possession is the thing that is illegal, right? Like of course, selling it is also illegal, but like possession is the thing they get you for, and possession means that you like under. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but like under legal things that you've bought it or got it from somebody for like it's not illegal to have a joint and smoke it. So if there's always these things where like if you're at a party and there's a joint going around and you smoke it and the police, like if they did a test, like they couldn't indict you because they can't prove that you possessed it. You didn't possess it, you just smoked it. There was always this thing where like lawyers would say, if you just find a joint like smoking in the forest, like lying in the forest, and you take it and smoke it, then it's not illegal. And there were these things where the police actually stopped the guy with the joint. There were always these stories, and then the guy would just run away and completely smoked the joint while he was running away from the police. And then if they didn't catch him with the joint, like if they couldn't actually get him, like only him smoking wasn't illegal, then they couldn't prove that he actually had possession. Of course, what is still going to be illegal is, if you drive and, that's just like, under the influence is just, alcohol is a legal drug in Germany, but you can't drive. So that's the same thing. So that's going to be very interesting. Another interesting fun fact is that there's actually industrial growing of THC-containing cannabis in Germany already. There's several, I think, 1,000 tons being harvested already, like at least this year. There's like a big plantation in Niedersachsen. And it's for medical marijuana. So there has been I don't even know what to call it, like the German drug, like the German equivalent of the what's it, the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, like, the people that check drugs, like as in, not drugs as in DEA drugs, like hard drugs as in, what the doctor gives you, I don't know, medicines, right? So those people, there was actually a trial with medical marijuana, and they gave licenses to companies to grow it. And so they're all set up, right? And there's actually farmers who said, "Oh, we're probably gonna do that. You can do that. You could even grow it outside in parts of Germany, which would probably work." But they were like, "Oh, we probably need like electric fences or something." So you could. So that's already going on. So that's going to be interesting. Of course, with all these things, we don't know when this is going to happen. Presumably in the next 4 years, because that's how long the coalition contract, obviously the agreement works. But yeah, something that is more that's probably the biggest news item in this whole thing. But something that's much more interesting to listeners of this podcast. I obviously did an episode on upload filters. That was episode 73. Because of obvious, like, that was when this getting upload filters in Germany and the protests against them, which is like a European legal initiative, have been going on for years, and that's when, this episode, when was this? This was in June. This was when this passed, and they actually put in the law that you now have upload filters, and I've talked about all copyright and like where it goes wrong, and showed examples of where like the previous filters would go horribly wrong, in my case and in other people's cases, and that this is very easily used for censorship, and the new coalition has actually acknowledged that, because they say they want to get rid of upload filters. And specifically, in the same sentence, they specifically quote free speech as a right in connection with this. So they're saying we want to get rid of upload filters because of the free speech issues, which I think is amazing. That is pretty great. That is really, really cool. I'm pretty sure, the Greens might have been involved in this, but the SPD actually passed the upload filters. I think the Greens did as well. I'm pretty sure the FDP was instrumental in this, like the Liberals, because obviously upload filters are just a bad idea. I talked about why, like they're not even from a free speech and anti-censorship point of view, which you probably have, you listen to the show, but like from an economic view point, they're also shit. And the FDP, the Liberals, are very friendly towards smaller businesses, which, I never really liked them back in the day, but I'm liking them more and more. Might be because I'm kind of running a small business here. That might be one of the cases. There are also some I don't know, what I would think of as like shitty ideas in this. And one is something that's probably meant as a hate speech law, anti-hate speech law, but it's called, they want to have a law against digital violence. Digitale Gewalt, and I presume specifically that term is like really bad, and I've talked about it on this show a lot. I've mentioned that in the past. I've been a victim of heavy bullying, in-person bullying, though, and how I feel about that, and I'm probably going to talk about that a little bit more in episode 100. That would probably be a good topic. Like, I'm going to explain a little bit where I come from and where I grew up, and that's probably going to be in there. But it's often used like in a digital context. It is often used like, bullying or, mobbing, as we call it in Germany. And hate speech is often used in a censorship way, or just, to shut down people you don't like. And specifically, I don't think there's such a thing as digital violence. There is like psychologic, you can certainly, what I'm saying there is I don't want to minimize the harm you can do to somebody by bullying them online. I didn't experience it back in the day. I just experienced it in person, because when this was happening to me in school, the internet was just up and coming, and nobody knew how to kind of deal with things. And, this whole stuff, like how to psychologically manipulate somebody over the internet, wasn't really, like, people didn't really know. They barely knew how to use the internet, if they even had the internet. I mean, I only got the internet in 98, and I was already being bullied in school heavily by that time. So the internet actually for me was like kind of like, today you would say, a safe space. A space where I could be a nerd and I'd be on forums and talk about Star Trek, and without being bullied. That actually helped me a lot. But I don't want to take away from the fact that you can drive somebody in very, very, very bad psychological distress. You can drive people to kill themselves, and it has happened before. It's definitely a huge problem, but it is not violence, right? Violence is me taking a metal pipe and smashing your head in. That's violence. It's kind of like saying that breaking into a company and stealing data off their servers is war, right? I did an episode on cyber war. Maybe I have to do an episode on cyberbullying. That might be good, and elaborate on this a bit more. But it's just not the same thing. That doesn't mean it's not bad, and it doesn't have very real consequences. But it is a very different thing. And calling it the same thing just makes people who do not understand what is going on misunderstand it, right? So it's not the same thing as digital violence. If I and the problem here is, and I'm really seeing this, is that legal people who don't understand it, and people who make laws, like politicians, they'll put in like the same or like even worse punishments of jail time, for example, for these acts, right? And from my understanding, it cannot be that if I go to somebody's house or meet somebody on the street, right, and I'm taking a knife, or like, let's say, no, that would probably be attempted murder, so let's not do that. Like, I'm taking a metal pipe, and like I'm not even like, if you hit their head, it's probably also attempted murder, but I'm breaking their arm, right? I'm taking a metal pipe and I'm just smashing their arm, or like even without a metal pipe, right? Maybe I'm good in kickboxing or jujitsu, and I'm just gonna take their arm and just fucking break 5 bones in their fucking arm, right? And if you do that, and you get like, I don't know, 2 years of jail time, and then if you bully somebody online heavily, and you'd get the same or even like a worse punishment, I think that is wrong, because it is just a different, like, the thing with, I think personally, as somebody who has has been a victim of heavy bullying back in the day, if people had just told me something, if we had just had education about this, right? If you taught this in school, like, there are defense mechanisms you can employ. They're very easy, just ways of thinking about things that can completely, I mean, probably doesn't work for everybody. Everybody's psyche is different. It's going to be harder like, I would have never killed myself. I'm just not that kind of person. Like, you can't get me into that bad of psychological distress, right? Even when I was really bullied, I was just like, at some point, actually, and some guy actually really badly bullied me. I actually got violent. I actually nearly beat his head in. If a teacher hadn't stopped me, I probably would have smashed his head against the stones until he was dead, which is bad as well, right? Not only for me doing it, but it's like, I would probably, don't know, I was too young to go to jail, but I would have gotten like really bad. So it has bad effects on people, but there are ways you can defend yourself against that you can employ that are much easier than defending yourself against physical violence, right? The easiest being like switching your internet off or whatever, right? And I talked a little bit about this in what episode was this? 94, when I talked about the Drachenlord case. How there's a point where being bullied and you being able to stop it. And if you don't do that, like that's its own problem. Or if you like even goading people like that guy did and still does into bullying him, then that is like, I'm not saying, what I'm not saying is that the bullying isn't bad in that case. It certainly is. It's like somebody goads somebody else into attacking them physically. Attacking them physically is still a crime. And I understand that there are situations where you can't defend yourself against, like, psychological distress. For example, in my case, a big reason why I couldn't defend myself against the bullying was that I was in school and I was forced by adults to be in contact with these people, like, 6 hours every day, right? But what I'm saying is we don't need laws against bullying. What I had needed in that case was a teacher who was educated and not a fucking idiot, who saw what was going on. And there were actually teachers who were actually supporting the guys who were bullying me, right? Which is often the case. If you talk to people who are bullied in school, it happens a lot. Because teachers don't know better, or they're not educated, or they're just plain idiots, or they're plain cruel sometimes. What you just need is like a teacher who recognizes what is going on. And you can pull these people apart. They could have just put me into another class and everything would have been fine. It would have been extremely easy. I think at some point I actually asked the teachers to do that, and they were like, I can't do that. Everybody wants to do that then. And so there are ways. It's just different. What I'm saying is just different. There can be, I think it's okay if there's a discussion. You don't have to be of my opinion, and of course feedback is always wanted on the show. You know this. I'm going to talk about at the end of the show how to do that. But basically go to privatecitizen.press, contact stuff, links in the show notes, all of that. But I think there can be discussion if the punishment should be as bad. I'm personally thinking it shouldn't be, but I think that's a point we can discuss. I think what in my opinion is something that I will not compromise on is that treating a digital thing like a physical thing when they're not the same, and treating them the same is wrong, and it leads to people misunderstanding what is going on. It leads to wrong laws, treating cyber war like war, like Joe Biden was threatening to do, is dumb and will cause probably more problems than if you understand what it is, because that is based on a misunderstanding on what is going on. And terms like digital violence themselves are just bad. Like they're either propaganda terms or they're grossly misunderstanding. I don't know who tells these politicians these terms, but there are a lot of these like bullshit, like even almost PR terms, not in this case, but like in this coalition agreement, which worries me, but it's politicians. Anyway, some other interesting laws. One thing this coalition wants to do, it wants to establish a right to anonymity on the internet, which I think is a good thing, because we've had in Germany now for several. I don't think I ever really talked about this on the show, but it's got to be an interesting topic as well at some point. And I haven't researched this, but it's probably applicable to other countries. I think I've heard stuff about this in the US as well. In Germany, we call it Klarnamenspflicht. So the law, it would be like a law that requires you to tell your real name when you sign up for online accounts, right? And they always say, "Oh, this is for fighting hate speech and bullying and fake news." And this coalition wants to go in the very other direction and say, no, everybody has a right to be anonymous on the internet, which I think is actually a lot more progressive than the so-called anti-hate speech progressive stuff. I think this is really cool. What I don't know if it's going to work and how it's going to work, they also, to enforce this, they want to make like intentionally de-anonymizing somebody a crime. So this is like, I'm guessing they mean doxing, but I don't know what happens if, like, say I run a forum and I know your real name because you sign up with that, and then somebody like hacks my server. I don't know how that's going to work. But like this is something that's going to be very interesting for all of the EU, especially also like the upload filters. I didn't mention this, but that's going to be interesting on an EU level as well, because of course that is the EU directive. And if Germany goes, no, we're not going to enforce this, which is weird, of course, because the upload filter initiative originally was an initiative coming out of Germany by the more conservative government. So that's going to be very interesting. But this also, like, this is almost going to be like, that's going to be new law. If there's a right to be anonymous on the internet, you'd think that they try to get this in on the EU level. What's very interesting, what I really like, is they specifically mention a right to encryption, which is going to be great in the crypto wars I often talk about. The question is, does site channel, the site scan, what is site scanning, or I forgot what's called, CSS, isn't it? Client site scanning. I mean, that's technically not breaking encryption because you still have encryption, right? So you could weasel your way around this. But, I think it's good that it's in there. They also have many like anti-tracking goals in there that, they want to do, which I think is great stuff. Then maybe not something we traditionally talk about on this show, but that might be interesting for people listening. They want to have a right to repair, which is something that France has recently passed, which generally just means that companies, let's say you buy a mobile phone, they must give retailer or like service technicians spare parts and the ability to have those spare parts, right? For example, I mean, to give you a non-techy example, my Seamaster being in revision, right? The mechanical watch from Omega, which is a Swiss company, and they're on this crusade to become more posh than Rolex, I think, because they're raising. They used to be like the somewhat understated alternative to a Rolex, and also quite cheaper. Not cheap, right? We're talking 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 euro watches, but still, like if you like back in the day when I got my Seamaster as a present, I think it was like 2,500 euros, whereas like the comparable Rolex, which is like the Oyster, the Rolex Divers watch, would have cost like 5. So it was almost twice as expensive. But anyway, Omega is going the other way. So my watch has a so-called ETA caliber in it. So the mechanics in there. It's a company that ETA is a Swiss company that sells these calibers to luxury Swiss watch manufacturers. So they're in IWC. Some other companies use them. Anyway, they were bought by the Swatch Group, which owns Omega, which is weird. And then Omega moved to their own caliber called the coaxial caliber. Since then, their watches got a lot more expensive. And specifically, they're not handing out spare parts. It used to be that you weren't able to service these watches. You had to send them in to Omega Service Center, which takes months. They replace everything in the watch, like even if it's not broken. It's like just there's some minor cosmetic. They replace that because they want to make money. And it's relaxed a little bit, but there are lots of industries like this where something like this has happened in cars, is happening a lot. And I like to go, like I go to an independent watchmaker, right? And I'm really happy that I have an ETA caliber in my watch, because those are in all kinds of different Swiss watches, and they can just get the spare parts, and everybody can basically service them, which is really cool. I like stuff like that. So that is a non-tech example, but like a tech example would be like a mobile phone, right? So Apple would have to give the spare parts to anybody who wants to repair them, and make it easy for them to repair. Give them manuals and all kinds of stuff. Probably they wouldn't be able to like glue everything fucking together, so you can't service it anymore, which I think is generally a good idea. I like this right to repair stuff. I'm not sure how it's like. See, this is either something where it's going to influence the US or it's going to be futile, because first of all, they would like, if you have this law in Germany and France, that like France has their own law, but if you have one in Germany, it really doesn't work. Like the German market can't force Apple to do something, right? If Apple really gets pissed off, they're like, we're not selling iPhones in Germany. And if they do that, this government who, like, I'm willing to bet that 95%, probably 100% of all those ministers have iPhones, the German government would topple the next day. If it was, you can have a traffic light coalition government, or you can have iPhones tomorrow, that government would not survive. So, I don't know. They're probably going to have the EU on board. This is why you want the EU. I mean, I talked about how the EU is banned recently, but it's also good. And I talked about that because you want a bloc, right? You want a bloc of countries that can enforce things. And you'd have to get all of the EU on board to do something like this. But I think it's generally a good idea. And it's good that they want to do that. Connected to that, they want to have basically an update guarantee for IT devices. So if, kind of like, Google is enforcing with Android and Apple's doing on their own, but it'll be like a law where if you buy like a router, you'd have to have like 4 or 8 years of security updates or whatever. They don't have set any specifics. But let me tell you, this is going to fuck over router manufacturers because they have no plan how to update the devices. They they just have some Chinese company build that thing, they put the firmware on it, and then they burn the tool chain. And if like 2 years later you want an update, they're like, we can't do this. We've moved on. We're doing something completely different. And the actual router manufacturer's like, we don't know how this works. We just bought this from these Chinese guys, and they're no longer in business. Or they're now doing something else. So that's all going to have to change. This is probably also going to be interesting EU-wide. I think that's generally good ideas. Then they have something I'm indifferent on, voting and driver's licenses for 16-year-olds. It's going to be, for driver's license, going to be the same in Germany right now. If you're 17, you could make a driver's license, but then until you're 18, every time you drive, you have to have at least 30-year-old person sitting in the on the other side, right, on the riding shotgun. And so they're just going to have that for 2 years. I'm totally indifferent on that. I like that they're committed to not having a speed limit on the Autobahn, because that's the German cultural Kulturgut, as we would call it, a cultural touchstone that should never be changed. And this was specifically the liberals who said no way, because the Greens wanted it for some idiotic reason where it's supposed to cut carbon. It's bullshit. It probably cuts some emissions, but it's, compared to industry or fucking ships or trains, getting your iPhones from China, it's just a joke. So they decided against that, which is good. The voting for 16-year-olds, I don't know. I can't really complain about this because I voted the first time when I was 16. We'd had this for a long time in local elections. So this is not going to be for federal elections. I guess I can't complain. I think all young people are idiots and shouldn't vote. But that's because I'm old. And if you think Fab's not that old, I'm very nearly 40. And my hair is very, very gray, and my beard's getting very, very gray. So I'm an old man inside. I mean, admittedly, like my wife says, and she's right, I was born an old man. I'm pretty sure my soul is 65 years old, and it's been 65 since I was born. And it's going to be very interesting when I'm not going to turn 100, I'm sure. But when I'm 100, my soul will still be 65, which will be really weird. I'm going to be in total equilibrium when I'm 65, probably. But yeah, so I'm old, and I think young people are idiots, which I think there's good arguments to be had for that. But so, I completely I would say old people always say that, but looking back, I think I was an idiot at 16. So I think that's what you learn when you're older. But, what can you do? It's not going to be the worst thing. Everybody, it's all going to shit anyway. I'm stoic about this. I'm stoic about that one. Then now comes the things that I'm not stoic. Well, I have to be stoic about, really, because nobody can't change it. But I think it's going to ruin us. And it's total idiot. Like, there's lots of climate idiocy in this. What I really liked was climate neutral data centers in the next 5 years. I think this is a typical thing where this is like people have no idea what they're talking about. I don't think. I mean, I haven't researched this, to be fair. I don't know what I'm talking about either. But I think I know a little bit more than those people making these laws and advising these politicians, because I'm pretty sure they have no idea how much power data centers use. And like, specifically data centers have this very specific problem that they need power all the time, which, is a bit of a problem if you're going all renewables, which this government wants. I mean, it's not an unsolvable problem, but you run into problems because that means you can't just have like solar power. You also need batteries, right? And it works. I mean, we see this. There's very good examples of data centers. Apple built a huge data center. They built one in Nevada. I think Google has several of those. But like in the desert, they just have power cells, solar cells, and they have tons of batteries. And it works really well. But I think if it's 100%, all of them, all the time, and also you're in fucking Schleswig-Holstein where the sun never shines, and then you need wind, and then you need batteries for that. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying I don't think these people who want this have checked. I'm pretty sure. And I did some research in the last week or whatever. I was reading about this, and I couldn't find anybody who has checked. I mean, there are these things. There are some examples in the US. But a lot, like especially one, I don't think it was the Apple one, but like one of the ones in Nevada isn't like it's like marketed as being completely carbon neutral and whatever, and it's like it's got solar cells and actually got wind power as well, but it's actually also connected to some, I think even a nuclear power plant somewhere, just to have, you have peaks and troughs, and you need to kind of balance this whole shit out. I mean, there's some very smart things you can do, because I mean, power obviously kind of works because like solar power works to a large degree because data centers don't need that much power at night, especially now, because back in the day, we ran a lot of the EU infrastructure of US servers, which, you don't really have that much anymore because, I mean, latency, but also like the GDPR and stuff like that. So if they're more local, it works a lot more, but I just don't think they have checked. And I'm sure they haven't checked for other, like they want to have the country fully climate neutral in 2045. And you don't even know what that means. What's climate neutral? Like, is it carbon emissions? What like they're just, that's just the thing they threw out there. And then the thing they definitely haven't, like the thing they haven't checked, because I mean, if they checked this, they know this is like post-apocalypse Germany. No petrol engines by 2035. I mean, this is just a huge, I mean, I'm not saying that isn't achievable. That is certainly achievable. I mean, you can outlaw the building of new petrol engines, which is what they want to do. Then, they want to get rid of old ones. They just want to stop building new ones. You can certainly very much do that. You can have a law, and then the next day nobody can build petrol engines because you put everybody in jail who does it. But the problem is 2035 is not that far off. And if you check right now how much of the German economy is dependent on petrol engines, and like what companies, how many employees they have, like all the companies that are connected to this, that are doing parts, marketing, everything, it's fucking huge. And their current approach is just like, this is a typical green thing, where they just go, yeah, but like they'll just be producing electrical engines, right? And they're leaving like, they're just basic facts they're just not looking at. Like, trucks. How do you do that with trucks? Like, where is your Tesla fucking truck that does all? I mean, I know there is one, but it's not in production for good reason, and there's just things you can't do with that. Like there is just like problems like batteries. If you have fully electric vehicles, all of them gonna have to have batteries. Where's the lithium coming from? Are we all buying all of that from China? Is there even that much lithium? Has anybody checked? Like, has anybody gone and said, okay, we're building this many petrol cars in Germany right now. If we replace them all with completely electronic vehicles, like how many are those? And how many batteries do they have? Like, how's the range going to compare to the petrol cars? Then there is a thing I know they can't fix. I'm pretty much 100% sure. I know they can fix this by 2035. It's the power grid. Like all those, we have huge infrastructure problems in Germany. Basically, our government, I think it's pretty much the same. You hear the same from the US, potholes and shit like that. It is not sexy. Politicians that don't get elected by actually fixing the infrastructure. They might get elected by promising to do it, but then they never do it because it's too complicated and fucking expensive, and they don't want to do it. So they don't do it. So like our internet infrastructure shit, we're spending huge effort fixing that. Our power infrastructure shit. So for example, a way you could have approached this is that, okay, we're moving a lot of this traffic that we currently have on trucks on the highways to trains. And a lot of these trains already run on electric power. That is true. But the German train infrastructure is abysmal. And it's been degraded constantly from the beginning of the 1990s. It's gotten worse. Less tracks. The tracks are broken. There's not enough trains. Like there's just not enough tracks. Right? If you look at the main train line that runs north-south in Germany, and I just know the upper part that goes from Hamburg to Hanover, or maybe a bit south of Hanover, which I traveled a lot. How little tracks there are, and what happens if one train just runs into a deer and gets stuck. The whole system fucking collapses. And we're not only talking people, we're also talking cargo, and they're like over the limit. Like this infrastructure is shit. And like if we start fixing it right now, I don't think we can get there by 2035. Not at the rate that we've historically been doing in the last 50 years. Like, even in an effort like Germany rebuilding after World War II, that might do it, but everything was shit and we just had to rebuild. You didn't have to force politicians to spend money to do it. People just did it. Like that, these are all the problems. Astral Caesar sounds like a 3-step plan. 1, ban petrol. 2, 3, environment saved. Yeah, exactly. That's what the Green Party does a lot. Like I've never understood. Like they've been going on in Berlin about just banning cars from the complete inner city of Berlin. It just doesn't like I don't understand. Sometimes I think I'm the only one with common sense. Like I think people are too idealistic, and they're like, even very intelligent people get very dumb if they're too idealistic. Like I have a friend who lives in Berlin, who's a very smart guy, who's older than me. He has a lot more life experience. And when I talk to him about these things, he's like, yeah, they're gonna work that out. I'm like, how? You fucking live in Berlin. Like he lives in East Berlin, outside the city, and like every time we visit him and go into the city, it's a fucking nightmare. Like the traffic there isn't, like the car traffic is a nightmare. The fucking trains are a fucking nightmare. And Berlin's are very stoic, I would say. So they're often, then I'll just need an hour to work. And I'm like, what? In Hamburg that takes me like 15 minutes. Yeah, it just takes an hour. I'm like, yeah, it's because your fucking public transport system is completely overloaded. Like, what the fuck? But like, they're just like, we're gonna work it out. Like, that's not how you plan, right? You can't just go, I want this to happen, and we're just gonna do it and hope for the best. I mean, you can do that, but it's incredibly dumb, right? I mean, if you want, the closest thing to that historically is the Soviet Union, which did a lot of things where, like, especially under Stalin, where they just decided to do something and then they just convinced everybody it would work, did it, and it completely failed. But like, if just imagine NASA would have tried to get somebody on the moon like that. They're like, no, we're not gonna like think it through to the nth degree and fucking calculate everything and, think about what the radiation is like and the pressures or whatever the fuck, the speeds. No. We're just going to build this capsule, put Neil Armstrong and Buzz fucking Aldrin in it, and just shoot them off. It'll work. We have to get to the moon. This is the best we can do. There's no radiation shielding on this cap. Yeah, well, it's gonna work itself out. Well, range might not. Terrestrial Jim says, well, range might not be the big problem as it's made out to be. I think in Germany the average distance driving in the countryside is like 40 kilometers per day. In the cities, even less. Yeah, sure. No, I'm not saying like a lot of the arguments are good. I'm going to talk about this with Mike probably to more. So I'm going to move on in a bit. But like, it's gonna work for a lot of people. Like I didn't have a car for 5 years. Like in London, for example, London works really well. The problem is outlawing it for everybody will not work. There are just people, my mom, when I was a kid, for, 15 years, her commute one way was 45 kilometers. And, there are a lot of people like that. I had a 150 kilometer commute, when I was living in Hamburg and I was working in Hanover. I wasn't doing that for fun. There were pressing reasons I had to get that. I didn't even have a car. I did on the motorcycle or the train. But like, there are a lot of people like this. There are people whose literally job it is. They're like salespeople. They have to drive all over Germany all the time. I'm not saying we can't solve this. I'm saying we need to sit down. Very intelligent people need to sit down and work on a plan. And you can't just do what Astral described there and just go, we start with the goal and then we'll just make a law and then we'll figure it out as we go along. That doesn't work. Astral says you described the Soviet space program. See, I don't, because the Soviet space program, if you look into it, was actually not like that. And they were really good. They were thinking about, they had problems, mostly with, a lot with manufacturing and stuff. But it wasn't like that they weren't, like, the space program was actually really realistic. But this is long after Stalinism, right? This is when they were, when they got their shit into gear a little bit more. And actually, this is very interesting about socialism generally. All of those systems, all of those, like, organizations where they did stuff like that weren't actually that socialist. They weren't going with the 5-year planning fucking thing. They were actually like more down to earth, if you want to say that. Because they needed to do this. And there's other examples. The Kennedy thing, we're gonna get somebody to the moon in like 5 years. There's like a 5-year plan in itself. But it's like, he did that. That was also a politician thing, right? But he did that on a much more informed basis than this, I think. I think he knew a lot more about what was going on and how they were going to do it. And, in the 50s, saying putting somebody on the moon sounds like, this is incredible. But I think that was a much more achievable goal than this. I think if the German government was going to say, we're going to have a Mars base by 2035, or let's say we're going to have a Mars base by 2040, that would be more realistic than saying, let's get rid of all petrol cars by 2035 and not have our complete country and economy collapse by 2040. Also, I'm not saying this can't be done, right? They can do this. The problem is, the thing I'm worried about is it's gonna hurt our economy, like twice. It's gonna fuck us over twice because we are a car manufacturing country. There's one thing that's a huge part of our economy is based on this kind of shit. That's one whammy, and the other whammy is if we then also fuck our economy because we can't get logistics sorted out, it's gonna fuck us over. And actually, there's this third point which I haven't even mentioned yet: is if Germany does this, right, And then, the Norwegians can do that, and the Swedes, because the fucking Norwegians sold petrol to everybody for 50 years, and now they're made of money. They can do this. Their economy is not based on this. But if we go and do this, and the Poles say, no, fuck you, we're gonna have petrol trucks, and then they already own the fucking transport space, but then they'll own everything. Because we can't get shit somewhere, and then the Poles just go, and the fucking Chinese are gonna eat our lunch. Because that's my worry. Because we Europeans we're going to save the planet, and it doesn't matter if you fuck our economy. And the Chinese are just going, look, they're our competitors, and they're actually better than us. But they're in the process of really fucking themselves. We're just gonna sit here and watch them really fuck. To me, this is a no-brainer. I don't understand. I'm in the shower and I'm reading the coalition agreement a little bit, and I'm going in the shower, and I'm in the shower. I'm showering, and I'm like, well, this occurs to me. Didn't this occur to these people? And if it did, why didn't they address it? I don't. How many salespeople are there? Are you shitting me? Are you shit? If you want to look this up, this Jim saying this, if you want to look this up, look up how much of the German economy is insurances, and how many people work for them, and how much money they make, and how much the German state makes by taxing them, especially the people working for the insurance companies. And then look up what insurance agents do. They have big cars, and they drive over the whole country every day. I know some of these people. There's some who sit in offices and on the phone all the time, right? And we're post-pandemic, and everything's going to be home office. We're all working from home. Yeah, right. It's not going to happen. I could have worked from my whole job. I could have worked from home. The only reason I had to drive those 150 kilometers is because of some moronic middle management people who want to control people. That's not going to change. The Greens are not going to change. This is power. It's power politics in a company, right? They're going to change this. How many salespeople are there? You might be very surprised. There are a lot of salespeople. Only people that are more there than salespeople in Germany probably is middle management, because they have to manage each other. Okay, they can actually do that from home. They don't need a car, but I don't think they want to, or what. And also, if we tank the economy, those people won't have anything to manage. All those controllers, and also the other limpets on the ass of the economy, the consultants. Sorry if you listen to your consultants, but that's all gonna tank as well. So I don't know. Yeah. One thing I find, this is my last point, one thing I find very interesting, we talked about the term race a lot recently, and this coalition is going to say they want to remove the term race from the Constitution, because in the article that talks about discrimination in the Grundgesetz, it says, niemand darf aufgrund seiner Rasse diskriminiert werden. So nobody, it's illegal to discriminate somebody based on their race. They want to get rid of race. They don't want to get rid of this discrimination article. They want to rephrase that, which I think is good, because race is an unscientific term that shouldn't be used. And to make sure they're affirming throughout this whole thing, that they're very anti-right-wing and stuff. They're actually saying that right-wing extremism is the largest danger to our democracy. I think it's a large danger. I wouldn't want to, give the impression it's not. I don't think it's the largest. I'm now convinced. I mean this. This sounds like an offhand, comment that I'm just making because I'm bitter or something. But I honestly think that the biggest danger to our economy, and you see this in today's days with the pandemic very clearly, is people who mean well, but who have absolutely no fucking idea what they're doing. They have no idea what they're talking about. And those people are very, very dangerous. And a lot of these idiotic climate things you get from those people. And by idiotic, I don't mean that they mean well. Like the goal, if you're idealistic, whatever, the goal is a good goal. And that's why everybody is like on board with it. They're idiotic because they are not based on reality, or often not based on reality enough. They don't listen to people. Like they want to change something and they don't listen to the actual people who do that job, who know what's going on, who know how a data center, they're just going to go, all data centers have to be completely like carbon neutral. And they don't go, look, Hetzner, hello, the biggest data center, whatever, or like Amazon or whatever. How do you actually, what does it take to run a data center? And if we wanted to do this like completely green, how would we do it? They don't fucking do that. And the problem is, these people, they're everywhere. A lot of these people are in the press. They're in politics. You know, they're on the street in Fridays for Future rallies. They fall into this groupthink because, I mean, the press is a big factor of this, I think, because they're well-meaning. The press assumes it's like, the press just goes, it's a good cause, we need to push this, right? And because they're journalists and they're fucking lazy, I can attest to that. I am a journalist. I'm fighting against this impulse every single day. But journalists are fucking lazy, and a lot of them these days don't know how to research things, or they don't have the time. They don't research the actual. They're just, somebody says we should do that, and they're like, this is a good cause, but they don't research, is this doable? And so people fall in this groupthink, and they're all running in one direction and nobody fucking goes and says, wait a moment, there's a problem here. Noble goal, but there's a problem here. I mean, people do that, but they just get, railroaded. Just like nobody listens to them. They just get shouted down. But the planet! Like, you can't be against, and in with the pandemic, you see this a lot. Like, I mean, I've just recently, anyway, Jim says, I'm going to follow up with that in a second. Of curiosity, do you have sources on your statement that there are so many salespeople that drive around? I actually wonder how many there are. I'm not trying to piss you off. No, I don't have any sources on this. I don't even know if there's statistics on this. But like, I mean, you can say this is anecdotal evidence, but I've worked in companies. I know a lot of people working in companies. Just ask people working in companies how many salespeople they have. Like, for example, Heise was it's a relatively small company, and an inordinate amount of salespeople driving around. I know, because they were the only guys who had company cars. The only people who had company cars were the CEOs, and then the external salespeople who were just driving around all day. Like I worked for an ISP. They had a ton of people who had to drive around all day. Like, not only salespeople, but a lot of them were salespeople. Like, I mean, the other thing is like support people, right? They need cars. If you do anything physical, you need and you need range. Like my father-in-law used to install, first it was like television, like cable, for large buildings, when they build like flats, huge complexes of flats, they put like a cable in or satellite dish on the roof for everybody to have TV. First he did that, and later on they switched to internet. It was all basically internet, and it was all like IPTV. But like, if you just, the amount of driving he did in a day, and he was just working in the rural area, but he was going like, he lived in Duisburg. He would just go from Duisburg to Essen, to Oberhausen, to Dortmund, to Düsseldorf, back to Essen in a day, and then driving back home to Duisburg. I mean, the amount of he went through a car every 2 years. Like, the car was finished after that. I would have to ask him how many kilometers he actually did, but it was insane. And like, it's like he wasn't special. Like, a lot of people have jobs like this. I think the problem is that a lot of people who have, I don't know what you're doing, Jim, but like people who have office jobs, they don't understand this. And they don't have many friends to do things like this. Just, the next time you have like somebody come into your house to do something, like fix the fix the toilet, or I don't know, build your if you get a new kitchen in, you get the guys in building the kitchen, or I don't know, anybody. Or like even your fucking Amazon delivery man, just ask them how much kilometers they drive a day and to how many people they go. And I mean, actually, my father-in-law's company is a very good example. They're a huge company. Like he worked for a smaller company and got bought by a huge company. And that company is a local company here. They actually they have house, like they're one of the biggest real estate owners in Germany, as in companies that rent real estate to private, individuals. They're huge, and they built this huge new headquarters at the Nordstern. Where is that? Is that actually in Essen? Oh God, it's the Ruhr area, so you don't know. It's like an old steelworks mining area. I'm gonna look this up. No, not the insurance company. Nordstern Park. Oh, it's in Gelsenkirchen, right? So it's like a huge, it's a huge mine, right? It's a huge industrial area, and they built a huge company headquarters there. And a few years ago, when my dad-in-law was still working for them, they said, we want to switch all the cars because they have all these people who drive around all day, right, to the different housing projects, the support. I mean, they have gardeners. They bought all these different companies, right, IT support companies, gardeners, janitors, everybody, the people building the houses, the people cleaning the houses. All of them were driving. They had hundreds, I think thousands of company cars. They were like, we're going to switch to electric cars. And we're going to have, I mean, lots of these people are driving from home, but like we'll have several hundred, like every parking space we have at the company headquarters will have a power charger for these cars. And they couldn't do it for the simple reason that they could not get electric wires, pipes to their company headquarters. And my father-in-law was laughing about this heavily because they announced this, and he was like, they're not going to do it. But he used to be an electrician before he started doing cable TV and shit like that. He was like, they can't do it. He's like, they don't understand that the pipe you need gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it doesn't scale, right? Like, to get that amount of power, like your pipe has to be big. You need like transformers I'm not good with electronics, right? So I don't fucking know. But he was like, one evening we both had beers, and he told me like, help me an hour long a speech why this wasn't possible, and why all these people, all these managers who just decided this because it was good for it's good PR for the company, were just complete idiots. And they tried to do it, and they fucking and we're talking about an industrial area like this. They had like huge power lines going there already. It was all like already there. They had power lines for a fucking mine and the steelworks and whatever else was there already. And those weren't like, they weren't running, but he was like, the infrastructure was there. And he's like, all that industry we had there in the 80s that was running the heavy industry didn't need as much power as we need for like those, I don't know, 1,000 or however many parking spaces they wanted to build, like with the charges. It's like, they can't do it. And they still can't. They've completely given up on this project. They can't do it. And he's like, it's so utopian to think that every German, like the Greens go, like every German will have an electric car. He's like, have they looked at electric installations in houses? I mean, even something like this where I live, which is a huge complex of flats where they build hundreds of thousands of flats, right? Even if they build them new, it's a problem getting the infrastructure in there. Like talking about like single houses that people have, where they have electrical installations from the 60s. He's like, you'll have to dig up every fucking line to every house. You'll have to dig up every fucking street. These people don't understand that we need a bigger fucking electric lines in the fucking roads. And we need more power plants. Like, it doesn't matter where this comes from. Like, if it's more like solar or wind power or whatever. And it's just so like sometimes you can tell that these people don't think. Like you just like your first impulse, and is it just me? But like sometimes maybe it's because I'm trained to look at things critically. Maybe I'm too critical sometimes, could be. But like another thing, for example, that is in this coalition agreement is that every German federal state has to provide 2% of its area for wind power. Okay, you go through the German federal state, right? You're Bavaria, no problem. You're Baden-Württemberg, no problem. You're Saxony, no problem. Brandenburg, no problem. North Rhine-Westphalia is going to start being a problem because it's very populated. But even there, you could, like, the problem is, like, you want to get those, it also says in there, they should be away from inhabited areas, right? And finding 2% of North Rhine-Westphalia that's away from inhabited areas, it's going to be hard. I mean, it's possible. It's not going to be where the cities are. So you have like lots of North Rhine-Westphalia, for example, is fields that farmers use. And you could put like, and they often do that, put those in the middle of the field, and then the tractors just have to drive around them. That's okay. But like there's houses around there, right? Like there are people living there. Like the farmers living there. Like you mean that those people are just, and these things are loud. I don't know. I have friends who live very close to wind power plant. And you sit in their living room and just hear this boop, 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 and they have good windows. So, you know, and there's like, you can't have roads under there because in winter they drop ice. So they don't think about these problems. And then you're like, okay, let's think about the really special federal states like Hamburg and Bremen. Like, there's no 2% area of Hamburg that you can put, like, where do you want to put them? In the river Elbe? But then the ships with your fucking iPhones and your clothes from China can't get into the harbor. Where are they going to put it? I lived in Hamburg. Hamburg has a huge problem of not having enough living space for people because they don't have enough room to build houses. Where do you want to do you want to build houses and then put the power plants on top of the roof? Like, what's the goal there? And then I don't even know about Berlin. Like, if Hamburg's bad, Berlin's gonna be like 100 times worse. I don't know where there's the 2% area in Berlin where you can put like they're all gonna be on Tempelhof or something. I don't know. I have no fucking idea. This just seems totally utopian to me and just like somebody who isn't thinking. Jim says, I agree that infrastructure for electric cars is a problem and will remain one. Yeah, but the thing is like that in itself is not bad, right? I'm not saying let's not have a lot of electric cars. But like have realistic goals and don't go like we're going to force people to use electric cars, even if they're not feasible for them, right? At least these guys are going to go for like all the time they mention electric cars, they say full electric vehicles and not this bullshit that the other government did where like you buy a huge SUV for Mercedes and it like has like a little shoebox battery that it like only uses to accelerate really fast. And then that's an electric car and you get like half of your money back from the government when you buy it. And it's now cheaper than like a small city car. And so everybody's driving around with these huge petrol eating fucking SUVs, but they have a little E on the number plate because they're, you know, theoretically electric cars. I mean, there's so much shit in this. Like, I'm not saying I'm gonna try to. Sorry, I'm being going on about this. I wanted to move on, but like, I'm gonna try to work this out in an episode with Mike because I need to discuss this with somebody. People often like I talk to them and they think like, oh, you're like totally anti-green technology. Like, no, but I want to be realistic, right? And the infrastructure is a problem. They're just people need range. The raw materials to do all of this will be a problem, like the fucking lithium for the batteries. So they want to have a law where when you build a company builds a building, they're gonna have to have solar power on the roof. You know, which in itself is not a bad idea, but it's like, where's the fucking rare earth coming from? You know, this is all things you have to think about, and like my issue is whenever, and I'm picking on the Greens because they're a big problem. So you have a Green politician, he's like in a talk show, and they're talking about this, and the press just goes like, yeah, oh, this is a great idea. Nobody ever goes and like, where's the lithium for the batteries coming from? Like, nobody ever presses anybody on this. Right? How is, if you switch Berlin, if you switch all petrol cars off, like, where are the trucks coming from? How do you get stuff inside a metropolitan area as dense as Berlin? Right? I mean, are you going to go put it on trains? Where are the train lines? Where will you put the train lines? When will you build them? Who's going to operate them? Who's going to pay for this? Like, you need to press people on this. Because what they're doing is they're trying to change how our whole country works based on like a prayer. Anyway, what I was trying to say was, I think that's why people who mean well but have no fucking clue what they're doing are the most dangerous threat. And, I was going to say the pandemic is a good example. It's a perfect example, no matter where you live. There you have a lot of people that mean well and they implement policies that are moronic. Like, I was fighting today on Twitter with journalists who were like, oh yeah, but vaccines are meant to save other people. And I'm like, where does it say that? Which person who's ever made a vaccine, like, I'm not talking about the pharma companies, they say whatever they want, like the actual people who invented this shit, like, when did they ever go, no, this is to prevent transmission or to save our healthcare system? Nobody ever said this before the propaganda kicked in. That's not what they're for. You take a vaccine to help yourself, to protect yourself. That's what a vaccine is. Anyway, it's just like, I don't know. This is it happens a lot these days, and I think that's the biggest threat. I'm not saying that right-wing people are not also a big threat. They are. But I think they're less dangerous because you see them coming, and everybody's like, all those well-meaning people also are also very primed. It's like somebody says something, oh, he's against immigrants, he's right-wing, he must be shut down, which I might agree with, I might not agree with. That's not the point. I think a lot more people are watching out for the right-wing people taking over than for the brainless, well-meaning people to destroy everything and fucking turn us into idiocracy, which is what I see is going on. That, I don't know. But, please provide feedback if you see this differently. Another thing they want to put in, which I think, again, is great, is they want to add to this, discrimination clause that discriminating somebody because of sexual identity should be illegal, which I think is great. You should do that. I think, I've said this often. I think people should be free to fuck whoever they want, however they want, and it's really nobody's business. And you shouldn't discriminate. You shouldn't discriminate people because of anything, vaccination status, who they want to fuck, what their nose looks like, what they do in private or in the church, We shouldn't do that. Let them do whatever they want. As far as pandemic measures are concerned, this is business as usual. They're going to do the exact same thing. Actually, the Karl Lauterbach was announced as a health minister, so somebody who is more intelligent or seems more intelligent than Jens Spahn. But that is not hard. You could probably go to any swamp, anywhere, and find a frog who's more intelligent than Jens Spahn. That is not very hard. He's also, I don't like Lauterbach. He's like all of these people. He's a maximalist when it comes to cutting down people's rights and just if these are people that if they could enforce, like during the lockdown, if they could have enforced quarantine by nailing your door shut like the Chinese, they would have done that. Jim says, to quote die Partei, which is the German satire party, fickt euch doch alle. Go fuck yourself, all of you. Yeah, good point. Lauterbach is weird. They had some good jokes because he used to be he's what we in Germany call a Hinterbänkler, it's a backbencher. Yeah, it's the same in English. He's a backbencher. He never did anything. He's a doctor, I think, from Cologne, but he never did anything. And then he just won't himself up with the pandemic, and suddenly he was on every talk show all the time. So there's this German satire magazine called Der Postillon, and when they announced that Lauterbach was going to be minister, they said they named the 3 biggest talk shows on German public broadcasting, and said all these the public broadcasters have decided to stop all these shows because the guy who's he's always on the fucking sofa is not there anymore, so that doesn't make any sense to run the shows anymore. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, I don't think much is going to change there, and this whole pandemic situation obviously throws a big wrench into whenever, like, is any of this actually gonna get done? Because right now it's always, the virus, and then somebody wants to do something. No, the virus. Now it's bad capacity. Now it's an app. It's always something that needs to be done. There's always another variant that's gonna kill us. Something's always happening. So I don't know if any of this is gonna happen. I just want one thing. I want them to legalize weed immediately, because that's gonna help me being a lot more stoic about all this, and I think it's actually gonna help a lot of people. Fun fact, I often talk about, I sometimes drink wine on the show, and I sometimes talk about our lovely, the people my family buys their wine from, our air quotes family vineyard, Weingut Hof in der Pfalz, in the Palatinate, Weingut Hof, Vineyard Hof. They're awesome. And my dad, who took the delivery, like we always pool, right? I think my dad pools the wine delivery for several people, including us. And he took delivery of the wine. I just got it today. I picked it up at their place. And I'm like, this is getting more. And he's like, yeah, fun fact. The vineyard people say that actually the alcohol consumption of private people, like from what they can tell, has risen significantly, which helps them a lot because, many vineyards have a lot of company, restaurants as their customers, and then a few private people. And with this vineyard, it's very small. It's the other way around. They have more private clients than restaurants. And that's what saves them, because obviously restaurants, they're not buying anything right now. They're all fucked, half of them are like, I just like, oh God, if I look at what restaurants I liked to go through, both in Hamburg and in Düsseldorf, like half of them is dead. And the other half is like on life support. So they're not buying anything, but so private alcohol consumption more than made up for it for them. They're like, this really increased. So yeah, this pandemic is not good for people's livers. So maybe we need to switch it up. We need some weed. Get on this. At least Lauterbach has said that he's for weed legalization a while before this, which is, at least that's something that makes it easier for me to be stoic about these things. So I think that's good. One last note, they have some new ministries. They renamed some. Sadly, they don't have a digital ministry that is still a traffic infrastructure and digital, which tells you how important this is. Neuland, right? In Germany. But interestingly, and this is, so to little background. We always had a ministry for the environment, right? Which is like the ministry for the environment, always, like since the Greens been in the government, like the 90s. So it's like the ministry for the environment and the protection of animals. But now we also have a climate protection ministry. That's already quite shitty or weird or whatever. It's going to cause problems, I think, that you have two ministries that are basically doing the same thing. But the really funny thing is that makes no fucking sense at all. And you're just like, did they run a trial with the legal weed while they were working on this document? Because it is now the Ministry for Trade and Industry and Climate Protection. Which, if you're Germany, those things are as far from each other as you can get. because everything you do for climate protection is going to just fuck with trade and industry in Germany. We have to recognize that is just a fact. Like, we are not the UK, right? Our industry does not run on banking. We're not a service industry. Largely, insurance companies. But, largely we actually produce things and we ship things around. And so, anything you do to protect the climate is going to fuck with that. I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying that the same ministry doing both is like, I don't know. It's almost Orwellian to me. It's like the Ministry of War and Peace. It's like, so who do you work for? I work for the Ministry for the Rights of Employees and Employers. The foreign and home office. Like, what the fuck? Oh, also one interesting thing is that the Green Chancellor candidate, Annalena Baerbock, is going to be foreign minister. So if you're in another country and in the next, few months, you're wondering what the fuck is going on with Germany because they made some really weird demands of your country or anything, it's that. Annalena Baerbock is a Green politician who is not very intelligent. In the run-up to her to her wanting to be chancellor, I mean, she made many of these, but like my favorite thing was she was asked in a TV interview about alternative power. This is a journalist asking a intelligent question, which doesn't happen that often, and I think it surprised her. A journalist asked, so if we have all this, solar power and wind power, we have the problem of having to store this energy. Where are we going to store it? And she said, in the power grid. It was hilarious. It's going to be some good foreign policy coming out of Germany in the next few months and years. I can tell you that. It's gonna be fun. Anyway, let's move on here. So that's my. I think in general, I mean, I sound very, very down on this probably now, but I think this is good. Things are happening. I really like these quite different parties balancing each other out. I just reading this the climate stuff in this agreement makes me deadly afraid of what a government agenda for a green government, a majority green government would have looked like. I mean, you can imagine that every time they said something like this, like Christian Lindner from the Liberals pulled out his fucking AK-47 and just fired, or like his Glock, and just shot the ceiling. Whenever the green guys were going, okay, we're gonna get rid of petrol cars by next year, and Christian Lindner goes, we're still here as well. Do you remember me? So it would have been just crazy. It's gonna be great. Jim says Lauterbach studied health policy and management as well as epidemiology at Harvard School of Public Health in Boston, graduating with a Doctor of Science in '92. Well, I don't know. You can't tell, really. I mean, we could start with, as an epidemiologist, it's a hard word to say, he should know that, vaccinating people is not your number one goal if you want to stop transmission of a virus. But apparently he doesn't know that. So I don't know. I don't know what... he's a politician. With people like this, I don't want to malign politicians, but I'm gonna do that. My dad was a career politician, and I think these people. I think these are easy to criticize, and you should be able to criticize them because these are people who go to the public and say, "I can do a job, and I want your confidence and your voice to do the job." And then they get elected, and then they're shit. So I think it's very, 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 very apt to criticize them, but like. if you're a good scientist, you're not going into politics. You're doing science. Because you like science. If you're a good epidemiologist, you stay an epidemiologist. It's like journalists who go into PR. Like, they're not good. Like, nobody who likes being a journalist and is good at it would ever go into PR. When you become a journalist that you're not paid as well. You're not going at some point, I would like more money, I'm going into PR. I mean, people do that, but they're not good journalists to begin with. Right? You're not training as a cardiologist and then go into politics if you are passionate about being a cardiologist and helping people. Anyway, that's my theory there. I don't know. I don't know much about the guy. I just read what he said a lot, and I didn't agree with much of it. So, what can I say? Anyway, let's talk about some feedback I've got. And Jim says, and it's 30 years since that. I would have forgotten everything. I did my PhD in 30 years. Yeah, good point. Unless you'd been doing it for 30 years, right? So, if you stay in the field, sure. But I don't know. You don't become a politician because you're amazing at your job. Right? And you like it. Generally. I think you become a politician because it's a fucking easy job, or you're power hungry, or you have the chance. I'm not saying he's dumb. He just really engineered his career well by, going on to a lot of talk shows, and now he's a minister. So the guy knows what he's doing. He's a good politician. But I don't know if he's the right guy to. But who cares? I mean, at this point, who cares? I'm very stoic about this because they could make a block of concrete health minister at this point. I mean, everybody agrees we just need to force vaccinate everybody, and then there's going to be a new variant, and then it's going to be panic again, and then we need to force vaccinate everybody. What we don't need to do is we don't need to train people to be COVID specialists and have more emergency beds, because that's not going to help, because the spread's going to be exponential anyway. So we just need to force vaccinate people. And if they don't want to get vaccinated, we should probably shoot them. We will try with the needle first. If we don't hit them, we'll just shoot them in the head with a 9mm. All right. Anyway, let's talk about feedback. Of course, you can give me feedback as well on this episode. Please go to Private Citizen, not Press. Links are in there. I need the contact links. The contact link doesn't have the forum in it, but there are many. I need to fix that still. But there are many links. I will at some point, I promise. Soon, TM. Just after Star Citizen releases. But there are many links to the forum in this feedback section, because this is all from one forum thread, which is a great thread. Anyway, so it starts off with Fadi Mansour, who goes by Redeemer F on the forum. And Fadi says, I can understand your frustration with the Constitutional Court ruling. But as you noted, if this was what the majority believes is true, so what can you do? And this is coming from a person who decided to change where he lives because people started to get crazier. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I've certainly been thinking about where to live. I mean, I would have, if I was on my own, I would have probably moved on from Germany by now. But I'm in a marriage and in a very healthy and good partnership, and a true partnership. So we've moved a lot. We've moved because I needed to move for my job. I've moved because my wife needed to move for a job. And currently she's the deciding factor. She's a lot smarter than me. She makes a lot more money. And so I'm taking her lead. So we're not moving to East Texas. Or West Texas would probably be better, personally. But yeah, I don't know. If I was on my own and I had no strings attached, I was just a journalist, I could live where I want, I would have probably tried. So I understand where you're coming from, Fadi. Steve B replied to this. I mean, there's some other stuff in this thread, but he replied, "I also understand the frustration, and I'm myself frustrated by this. While I do not know the intricacies of the German legal system, I'm not sure that the court ruling represents majority belief. In Canada, majority belief really only affects the elections. Once the party is in, they are free to do pretty much whatever they want, which usually does not include the things they promised in their attempt to get elected." It's apt. Good observation. Court rulings, however, do not follow that same path and are instead decided by either jury or judge directly. In the case of this ruling, it would appear that the decision was reached by a very small representation of the population, consisting of a very small subset of the population. I would question the ability of such a group to be able to decide on something that really is as monumental as this. So, in response to this, I would like to explain how the federal court works in Germany. It's very much like the Supreme Court in the US. It's a number of judges, and they just decide. They get together, they just decide. There's no suit or anything, right? There's somebody. There's basically somebody brings an issue before them, and they deliberate on the issue. They decide if they want to take it, and if they take it, they just have a decision, and that's binding for everybody forever. And they're very special judges. They're specially trained. They're very intelligent people. And they are, we're talking the Constitution here, and the purpose of a Constitution is not to represent the majority. It's a checks and balances. I study politics. I did a lot of research on this back in the day. It's almost 30 years ago now, but it's a long time ago. I might have forgotten a lot about it, but so the Constitution is, especially in Germany, is there to safeguard against a lot of things the majority wants, because easily, I have to mention Hitler now. Set your timer. What was this? An hour 53. That was pretty good. At least on my recording. Might be different on the actual podcast. If you look at German history, the Nazis and Hitler were elected. The majority of Germans back then thought whatever they wanted to do was a good idea. And so when we got liberated by the Americans and decided to have a constitution, we decided, that this constitution should safeguard against certain cases where the majority thinks something is good, but it might actually not be. And that's what constitutional freedoms and civil rights are. Right? There are rights that we decided are universal. And they need to be weighed against each other. That's always the case. But generally, they are there no matter what the majority thinks. And if constitutional courts calling here is to, if an issue arises where the Constitution is written once, it's it's not very specific in some cases. And when we need to decide, when we have an actual problem and we can't decide what does this actually mean in the Constitution, especially when we have to weigh rights, like in this case, the public, any member of the public has a right not to be harmed, and then any individual has the right not to be harmed, and then an individual has freedoms, and we have to weigh these against each other, and that's what these people do. Steve is right, this is not a majority decision, but somehow Fadi still picked up what I was trying to say in that episode, which is what happens is there's something like a zeitgeist, right? So if the majority of Germans think that we should weigh these two rights towards the right of the public, not being harmed, if that's the more important right in this case, then that becomes kind of the will of the people, because people say that, it gets in the press, and it gets reported and reported and reported. And especially in this case, in case of the pandemic, if you listen to people in the public, you think that everybody thinks that way. Certainly, pretty much everybody in the press thinks that way. Other people that think like me, they just don't get heard. People don't listen to them. They get shouted down on social networks. They get shouted down in Well, at the beginning, they got shouted down in talk shows. They're not invited to talk shows anymore. And judges are just people. Constitutional court judges are also just people. If they read the same newspapers everybody else reads, if all the newspapers say this, I mean, they're very, they're very educated on the Constitution, but it is within I'm not saying they did something completely wrong. It is within the realm of the Constitution and of their calling to decide this, and they decided one way. I'm just saying they should have decided the other way, but who am I to say that? But that's my problem here. But they are influenced by what the majority thinks, because that becomes like the zeitgeist, the groupthink, and I've experienced this myself. I wrote a column on this week in German. And basically, the same thing I talked about in the episode, basically, stoicism, and that I don't agree with what the majority of Germans, or what is reported at what the majority thinks. I actually I don't know if it's the majority. I think there's a hell of a lot of people who don't think that way, but they don't get represented. So I said, what do you do if the Constitutional Court decides the other way? The only thing you can do in a democracy at that point is be stoic about it, because there's nothing you can do about it. And I got shouted at on Twitter by a lot of people. And their gist was basically, this is not an opinion one can have. Like, their point was, you shouldn't write about this. This is not an opinion one can have. And I do not understand this impulse at all. And I've said this to a lot of people. I said, look, the whole society apparently is on your side. The press is on your side. The government is on your side. The Constitutional Court is on your side. They've decided this. There's nothing anybody can do. And I'm saying, I don't agree with that. How shall I cope with this personally? And then you're shouting at me that I can't even have that opinion? I can't even voice the opinion that in a case where everything's been decided and everybody's on the other side, that I say I'm not on that side and I have psychological problems with that and I need to figure out how to deal with that. And I actually turn to ancient Greek philosophy to figure that out. And you have a problem with that? Like, what is wrong with the discourse in this country? And I don't believe it's only this country. Same thing's going on in the US and probably where you are as well if you listen to this. In the whole world, the discourse is so fucked that the people who have won, after they have won, still can't let you have that opinion. And look, I'm not saying the Nazis were right and we should gas all the Jews, right? I'm having a legitimate argument. I'm saying I think this right that is enshrined in our Constitution should have been given more weight than the other one that was given the weight. That is a reasonable point to have. And also, I'm not even, people are like, you're a narcissist, it's all about your freedoms. I'm not the thing, and people need to realize, and I wrote about this on my blog, so they need to know, they know this. I'm arguing from a position where I'm not even of the people that I'm arguing for. I am vaccinated. Twice. I'm going to get the booster as soon as my doctor says, get the booster. I got it here. Come down. I'm going to get it. Even though I'm sick 3 days whenever I get one of these. I don't care. I'm vaccinated. I'm fighting for other people's rights. For the simple reason that if you take them away from them, you also take them away from me. I'm not even talking about this I don't even have a horse in this race. I'm already vaccinated. It's not about this single case. It's about the philosophical decision between the good of the many and the good of the few. And I'm saying our Constitution is specifically there to protect the few here. Because in a democracy, it's the will of the many anyway. That's why we have these articles that you can't change. And I think they should be interpreted to favor the few. Because these people are always the ones who are disadvantaged in this whole thing. Because everything else is set up to favor the many. And you already have the zeitgeist on your side. And then these people are all fucking hypocrites as well. Because like I know a lot of people I'm arguing with, and I'm like, you just, I know that you're doing this because you're afraid. I know. I've worked with this person. I know that this person is deadly afraid. When you came into their office and you had the sniffles, they were like, get away from me, get away from me, I don't want to get a cold. And I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with you? It's like, I know that that's their problem. Like, not all of them, but like some of them, that's their problem. It is so frustrating. Like the whole thing is just like, just leaves me flabbergasted, as Van Morrison. How's it go again? I'm flabbergasted at the headlines. People in glass houses throwing stones. How dare you have your own opinion and be able to understand different viewpoints, sister? Yeah. How dare I? How dare I have an opinion? How dare I got fucking thrown this fucking bullshit on me for like semester after semester in uni, you know, by all these fucking progressive right-wing professors who are like, yeah, constitutional rights, this is how it works, we have to fight for the constitutional rights. How dare I then 15 years later go and say, look, I think this is how you should have decided, because this is what the same people were saying. It's like, you know, people, I don't want to, like, we want to get away from these groups, and it's not good, right? It's not good to put people into groups, but sometimes I just, like, these are the same people who are vegetarians who tell me I shouldn't eat meat because it's so cruel to animals, right? But when there's a religion who says I only eat meat if they cut the animal's jugular and hang it upside down and let it bleed out, which is about the cruelest way you can kill an animal. Like, if that's their religion, that's okay. But you shouldn't eat meat because it's cruel to animals. Like, what the fuck is wrong in your brain? Is there like an imbalance of something? Because anyway, I need to look up some other lyrics because I need to quote this. I quoted this on the forum because we shouldn't put people into these groups because. So there's a country musician who I've got to know and love this year. His name's Cody Jinks. I've discovered him this year. He has a new album out called Mercy. There's a song on this called, he's a very smart guy. Very incredibly good songwriter. And he has a song on this album called Nobody Knows How to Read. And I wish I could play it on the show because it's so apt. And the chorus goes, agendas are sold to the masses. A train wreck, a car crash is all that they show. As soon as we're cut into classes, they shake up the bottle and watch it explode. This is 4 lines that explain how the media works better than anything I could ever say in this podcast. That is our problem. Anyway, that was Steve B. Yevgeny Kuznetsov, aka Necros, said in this very thread, first of all, Fab, you're not the only person to notice that you are poorer than your parents were. There were actual studies in the US and Europe, and these studies showed that people of our generation and younger, Yevgeny's my age, are on average paid worse than their parents were when they were at this age. We also have, well, if you compare that with, you know, even like people that are older than our parents, it's even worse, I think. You know, the especially in Germany, the generation after the war boom, like, you know, not quite my parents, but like in between kind of. You also have on average more chronic health conditions than our parents had at the same age, and our average life expectancy is lower. Why it is so is an interesting question that I don't have a definite answer to, but I think the change from technical progress to sustainable development helped quite a bit. Probably also all the working from home and drinking to forget our pains. That's probably a problem. You know, getting fat and getting heart disease. As for the episode proper, it looks to me from what I've read and heard, what I read and hear, that with this whole pandemic thing, civil rights started going down the drain everywhere around the globe and continue in this direction at a frightening pace. I don't like it, of course, and I think I agree with most, if not all, the things you said in the podcast. Now, here comes somebody who, he's my age, so he's still grown up and probably remembers a little bit of the Soviet regime. Somebody from Russia, and they have a very special, very, very special way of being stoic, which they had to, because otherwise they wouldn't have survived Stalin and everything that came after. Evgeny says, however, since there's hardly anything I can do about it, yay, stoicism and vodka. He doesn't say that, he just says, yes, stoicism. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how people get out of the totalitarianism that emerges. Living through these times will obviously be hard, but also very entertaining and educating. So, if it's unavoidable, I'd like to get the most out of it. I like that. There's a very positive take on this very depressing situation. I should have come up with that. That's pretty good. Leave it to a Russian to think like that.
Goddamn Ruskies!
And then Raccoon, a new user on the forum. I don't know if they have ever written to me before, but Raccoon said, thanks for your honesty and addressing the issue. I feel the same way you do. While you are talking about this stuff, you should have played sad jazz music in the background. I could have done that with Epidemic Sound. Damn it. Raccoon's right. What is currently happening is history and society is about to write a dark chapter. I think Raccoon's from Germany, because he at least speaks German, or they speak German. It is terrible how some people call for social division and agitate against the unvaccinated with means of soziale Ächtung. So-called, social, sidelining somebody socially. So-called ethicists from Germany tell us that discrimination or victim blaming is ethically justified. I can't believe that this is really happening. That's very true. I mean, how can that ever be ethically justified? I don't. There's just some things that the greater good doesn't This is what I was said about we're living in the future. This is where Vulcans. I think that's technocrats. I think that's a problem. This is where if I would have written a Star Trek series, I would have written a story arc where you actually figure out how dark, not even Romulans, how dark Vulcans can be, how dark the good of the many outweighs the good of the few actually is. Now, I think whoever writes this universe has stolen this idea from me, and we're currently, without the Vulcans, experiencing this. We're experiencing how dark that can be. Yeah. I mean, if I'd paid more attention in philosophy in school, I could probably say something very smart about this involving Kant in the social imperative or something. This is so wrong on so many levels. The people who think this have a very questionable view of humanity and do not represent democratic values. Well, I think the problem is they do represent democratic values. What we're figuring out here, democracy is not inherently good. Democracy can be your enemy because democracy is the will of the many. And if the many are just, I would say, morally corrupt or whatever, or as you say, have a very questionable view of humanity, then, we up shit creek without a paddle. There is no fair discussion at all because every critic is called an idiot. It is difficult, this is what I'm experiencing, it is difficult for me to talk about this topic in public as I'm observing the chilling effect. I would like to say something to Raccoon at this point. I would say, see, this is why I think I like when people are not anonymous on the internet, and I can trust them a lot more if I know their name. But I think this is why being anonymous on the internet is very important, and it's good that it's in the coalition agreement. And I would like to thank you for coming and saying that on the forum. Even though you're anonymous, I don't know who you are, and I don't care really. But I've had several people tell me similar things who wrote me emails or encrypted messages, who were even in most cases too afraid for me to even anonymously quote them with similar things ever since I've been reporting it, since the beginning of the show, basically, about these COVID measures, because they say basically the gist of what they're saying is, I disagree with like the mainstream zeitgeist in a certain area about this, about the pandemic, about the measures, but I'm afraid to voice that opinion. And I think that's very, very worrying. And I'm glad that you came out and said this, because you might think that it's not very valuable and that you're like maybe a coward for not putting your name to it, but I don't think so. I think it's also very important that people say something like this anonymously and can do that, because we need to heed that. There are more people out there that disagree with this, but which are afraid to get sidelined, soziale Ächtung, to get pushed. I'm not afraid to do this, and that's why I became a journalist, specifically because I don't know. I think it's somebody this week called me a narcissist, and I probably am. I'm certainly have a big ego, and it feeds my ego, even though it's not like what I'm doing is I do this because I believe in this cause, and I'm fighting for rights that I think are important, and rights that are not even in this case apply to me because I'm vaccinated. But I can see that what I'm doing is not good for me. Like I'm going to talk about this a little bit in episode 100. I got prompted by I think Fadi asked a question about, I said offhand on a show, I think, about how friends have reacted to this kind of thing, and I know this. I know it's not good for my career, right? I know that other journalists read this, and I'm probably not getting work because of this. But I don't care. I think it's much more important to me, and that's why I became a journalist, to say things that are important that other people are not saying. Wait, I have another. It's fucking Cody Jinks. I have to look up other lyrics, because saying this, I just remembered that there's more Cody Jinks lyrics that very much apply to this. So on this very album, Mercy, there's also a song called All It Cost Me Was Everything. The chorus goes, money can't buy more than it can, when you ain't got nothing but something to prove. The price is high for not giving a damn, but when you don't, you ain't got nothing to lose. It ain't hard to be a fool like me. All it cost me was everything. And sometimes I feel like that. But I think it's important. I think it's also important that people come out anonymously and talk about these things, and I think that gives strength to other people who see they're not insane. I don't need that in this case. I know that. I don't want to say I'm right, because this is a matter of opinion. But I know in my heart that I'm fighting for the right cause here. Right? It's not a matter of people dying, because I don't know. If you would actually follow what I say, more people would die or whatever. It's like, that doesn't even matter. Like these are rights that are there for a very important reason, a very important historical reason. And once they get taken away, we'll never get them back. And so I know this is extremely important. Like, even if people like these are people like, okay, if we do this, then people die of the virus, right? And I say, these are rights that people have died for. Hundreds of millions of people have died for this in World War II. Died for these rights. Died for the fact that we never again have a government that thinks it can force people to have medical procedures. It's not about this very moment. I don't think it's right now, but that's in this pandemic, but that's not the point. They've taken this away in this pandemic. This will never apply. The next fucking eugenic, it doesn't even have to be the Nazis. The next people that come along and say this medical procedure is needed, they just go, right, we have a constitutional court decision that says if there's a danger, we can do this, and then they just need a danger. And it's not about if there's a real danger, it's about how perceived danger. That's how this whole thing started. It's not about the real danger. It's about people are afraid that they're going to get the virus, and that they think if they can force other people to get vaccinated from the state, then they're more safe. And they're willing to sacrifice that. And that is why, I mean, I know people are like, you overusing the Nazi metaphor, but I think it's very apt. This is why a majority of Germans looked away when they took some of their neighbors and put them in a concentration camp. Because they were like, it's not us. I think I'm more safe now. And this is why we have these fucking rights, and this is why I think it's a no-brainer that you fight for them, but who knows? Anyway, other people are not that, are not that clear on things, and they need. I know by experience that this helps. I've also experienced that last week, this week, in a much more unimportant way when I wrote my Star Trek Discovery review, which I also thought I was right. I wrote a very negative review of the first 2 episodes of the current season. And I was very clear, I elaborated very detailed why with my. I don't want to tout my own horn, but I have excessive knowledge of Star Trek. I've watched. I'm a Star Trek nerd, right? I've watched Star Trek since I was 6, right? I've literally watched I haven't watched TOS that often, but like maybe 2 or 3 times, 4 times, maybe 5 times by now. But like TNG, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine. Each of those series I've watched 6, 7, 8 times completely. And by now, like 3 or 4 times in English. Maybe 2 times. And now, TNG, I've started watching it again. So it's like 2.5, I don't know. But like, I've watched Star Trek a lot, so I have a lot of knowledge. So I know where I'm coming from there. And I think I had a very good elaborated position. And then everybody shouts at you like, you're wrong. And even if you're that sure of yourself as I am, because I'm probably a narcissist, you start to wonder, like, are these people, they're all shouting, are they maybe right? And then you get that 1 or 2 email where like you're completely right. I'm also a Star Trek fan. Here's what annoyed me. And you're like, I didn't think of that. And they're like, yeah, I know. And then you like back and forth, and you're like, and you just realize that sometimes you just need one other person out there who thinks like you. You're like, okay, I can't be completely. I'm not the only one. If I was the only one, right? I was the only one thinking this, I'd be doubting my sanity. But there's at least one other person with a different background than me who's like, yeah, that turbolift scene where the spaces in between the turbolifts are bigger than the fucking ship in Discovery, that was dumb. That shouldn't have happened. And whoever wrote that was a fucking idiot. And I'm like, yes. And, this is kind of the same thing. At least there's one other guy out there who thinks a little bit like that. And then you're like, So, anyway, I also would like to say that in this thread, I replied to Petit Michel, who's also on the forum, and I just clarified a point that might have not gotten completely through. Like, what I don't want to say is I'm not saying that vaccines don't protect other people, right? They mitigate some infections. I mean, it's clear that like if you're vaccinated and you're not getting as sick and you're not getting the sickness for as long, you're already mitigating spread. I'm not saying that doesn't work. What I'm saying is that vaccines were never designed to do this, and that telling people so is extremely misleading, right? And that hoping that the vaccine will get rid of the virus is just like I wrote here, hoping for the vaccine to get rid of the virus somehow flies in the face of basic epidemiological epidemiological evidence from all kinds of other outbreaks in the last 100 years. It's very obvious if you look at the literature, even from the WHO and places like the RKI and CDC, pre-2019, before the propaganda hit. Like, you know, that even the WHO was clearly disagreeing with this. And I think it's these experts that are on TV and everybody, and the politicians, they're basically lying to people. I don't know. I won't say they lie, because I think in most cases they don't know any better. But they're misleading people, maybe unintentionally, but like, so they're giving them false hope. And they're fucking up better responses we could have. And I'm not saying like, don't vaccinate people, right? I'm saying vaccinate as many as you can. I'm just saying don't fuck their civil rights over in the process. But like, also, if you leave the civil rights discussion completely out of it, one big issue with going vaccination, Germany has done this because we completely zeroed in on we have to vaccinate everybody and then it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And we just repeated this as a mantra. We just didn't prepare our healthcare system. And now people are like, yeah, but the healthcare, like if it rises exponentially, then the healthcare system, like, you know, having double the beds would only help you like 10 weeks or whatever. It's not rising exponentially. Nothing, like even fucking bacteria in a petri dish are not completely exponential. But, you know, anyway, it's 12 weeks more or 10, or even if it's 2 weeks, even if it's 2 days, why didn't we do that? It's a no-brainer because we have to vaccinate them. Like, it's like, that's all I want to say. I'm not saying it can't help. And yes, of course it helps the healthcare system. But like, where are points of diminishing returns, right? We are almost at 80% vaccination right now in Germany. And like, if you're throwing, the only thing I'm saying is, I mean, I'm not even saying that because we have decided already. And, you know, the new chancellor wants to force vaccinate people and it's going to happen. And the Constitutional Court has decided and it's all going to happen. So I'm not actually arguing against it. I'm just saying, to me, there's a point of diminishing return where for like, I don't know, you're going to get it to 95, 90, even if you get to 100%. Like for these 20%, or whatever, you're basically sacrificing a very important constitutional right. And it's not going to really help you. Right? I don't think the virus is not going to go away. It's not going to go away. Like, even if we had hard scientific evidence that 100% vaccination rate makes the virus go away, we are just one country. What are we going to do? Vaccinate everybody and then close the borders forever so that nobody can come in anymore? This is a global thing. This is not going to go away. This virus is going to be there forever. On the other hand, you know, my argument still, there's not a single virus that we've been able to eradicate with vaccines, even though the WHO has claimed so several times. They turned back up again. It doesn't work with bacteria. You know, the plague, the first vaccine ever, didn't do that to the plague. There was a plague outbreak in Mongolia in 2018, I think. You know, because it's a reservoir in animals. It's going to be like... And yeah, maybe it'll save our healthcare system, but like really at what cost? And also right now it's not like... It's bad, but it's not as life-threatening as everybody says. I mean, yes, we have to postpone operations again, but you know, the ones that are postponed are the ones that are not life-threatening, and you can actually postpone them, and they get postponed all the time. And then you have like the Spiegel just goes, oh, the current Spiegel is just journalists just fucking drive me insane. The current Spiegel had title story is like, triage. How horrible is it for doctors? And you're like, fuck, have they actually talked to a doctor? Doctors have been triaging people for 100 years. You know, when a bus crashes on the motorway and you have like 30 people that are just minced up, you're gonna have triage right there. There was triage happening where they couldn't save everybody in like flu outbreaks like 2 years ago. It's not like that's something you learn if you work in a emergency room. So every doctor gets rotated at some point. So they all kind of know that with their hospital doctors. You learn that. You learn that in medical school. For a reason. It is a bad thing to do. It is horrible. But it is part of the reality. There's lots of shit that happens in hospitals that people just don't know about. And they don't want to know. And suddenly they're dragging this into that. And like long COVID is so horrible. Yeah, there's lots of shitty fucking things people lying in hospitals with that are really, really horrible. Right? Yeah, but it's not, you can't get infected by it. Yeah, it's true. But like, you'll get infected by this one way or another. That's what respiratory viruses do. That's why viruses have been around for millions of years. They're very, very successful in what they do. And especially if you release them from a lab. Oh, that has been proven. I'm sorry, I can't say that. WHO says that hasn't happened. Who was tasked with supervising that lab again? Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I'm not saying that vaccines don't protect other people. I'm saying they weren't designed for that, and that's not their main purpose. And telling people that's the main purpose is just grossly misleading. And generally, that forum thread for the last episode, 98, is good. There's some good discussion in there on other points. I put a link in the show notes. Anyway, I'm going to have to go now. This show is dragging on. I've been rambling for ages. And so just very quickly, let's go into the Toss the Coin to Your Podcaster segment. Where's the button I need to press? Here it is. And very quickly, you can support this show if you want to, monetarily, in other ways. All the links in the show notes, privatecitizen.press. And the people who supported this very episode monetarily and thus brought it to you, and who I would like to thank because I appreciate them very much, are Georges, Steve Hose, Butterbeans, Jonathan M. Heavy, Michael Mullen Jensen, Dave, Michael Small, 1I11G, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Rodane the Insane, Jackie Plage, Philip Klostermann, IKN, Vlad, Bennett Piata, Tobias, Kaisius, Fadi Mansour, Mode 7, Joe Poser, Sandman616, Dirk Didi, Rizal, David Potter, Avis, Mika, Mr. Amish, Cam, Dave Umrish, Ricky M, Barry Williams, Jonathan, RJ Tracy, Captain Egghead, Rick Bragg, Robert Forster, Superuser, D, Astral C, and No Reply. As they say on No Agenda, I thank you for your courage. Also, I thank all my Twitch subscribers, because obviously I live stream this on Twitch, and you can also support me by subscribing to my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Foxtrot Alpha Bravo, as in Fab, Alpha with an F, because NATO alphabet. Those Twitch subscribers who I thank very much are Mike the Dane, JohnsonMH_com, Redeemer F, Sandman616, Galtaran, Halifa, Violet Hummingbird, Bacon the Pork, Mode 7 is unavailable, and Stardew Lisa. Thanks to all of you, and I promise I'll stream more other stuff. I always promise this. I will try. Thanks to Bytemark. They are providing the hosting for the audio files, and I couldn't do the show without them either. They're providing this to me for free. Bytemark.co.uk. They're a great UK cloud hosting company. They're amazing, and I thank them very much. And with that, I'm out of here. Show's been going on for way too long. I thought this was going to be a quick show. Completely failed on that. So I'm sorry. No, why am I sorry? I'm giving you content. I'm not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Very quickly, the can't talk theme song for this show is called Acoustic Roots by Raoul Kabazali, recorded and written by him. It's a great song. Love it. And I'm playing you out. Oh, I need to pull that up. I'm playing you out with the song Fighting the Youth by Of Man and Wolves, which is great. And I'll be back next week everything goes according to plan with special episode 100. I'm very happy to hit episode 100. That is very special to me. Until then, always remember.
I aim to misbehave.
Oh, that's not the long shit. Fuck this. I fucked that up. Can't do that. Well, I'm not fixing that in post. Fuck it. Let's do it live. Where do I have the full soundboard? Because I think this is very important, especially in this very episode. I hope. That this is it. So I'll see you for episode 100. Until then, I'm very happy that I'll reach that. And see you soon. Until then, always remember.
This report is maybe 12 years old. Parliament buried it, and it stayed buried until River dug it up. This is what they feared she knew. And they were right to fear. Because there's a whole universe of folk who are going to know it too. They're going to see it. Somebody has to speak for these people. Y'all got on this boat for different reasons, but y'all come to the same place. So now I'm asking more of you than I have before. Maybe all. As sure as I know anything, I know this. They will try again. Maybe on another world, maybe on this very ground swept clean. A year from now, 10, they'll swing back to the belief that they can make people better. And I do not hold to that. So no more running. I aim to misbehave.
right. And that's it. And I'm switching to American time now. To still get the podcast out on Tuesday. So we're officially on American time zone now. And we are gonna raid now because I need to finish this podcast. Still have other work to do today. Holy shit. We're gonna raid, and I put my communicator on for this, Piece by Piece, who is a great streamer who I don't watch enough because she's in the US and she streams at times when I often sleep or work or whatever. She's amazing. She's an extreme Star Trek nerd. She does raps, Star Trek raps, and all kinds of shit. So please stay. She's fun. I promise you. If you're into Star Trek, she's great. I think she's just chatting right now, but she has a Alcast towel on her fucking chair. I mean, this woman is such a nerd. It's lovely. Anyway, we're gonna raid her now. Thanks for watching. I'm probably gonna record episode 100 on Monday, but I can't promise that. So stay tuned. In the forum, there's a thread you can just subscribe to, and then it'll tell you when I go online. Or you can use Twitch for that, but I can't really promise it. My schedule is all over the place right now. Anyway, say hello to Piece by Piece, and see you soon. I appreciate watching. I appreciate you watching, and live long and prosper.